Nigeria, and we begin with US 2024 election. JD Vance claims Trump did not lose 2020 election. 3 state court rulings leaves voting restrictions before US polls. China accuses Japan of illegal entry in disputed waters. US says B-2 bombers launch precision strikes on Houthis, and Kamala Harris clashes with Brett Baier on immigration. US 2024 election. JD Vance, Republican vice presidential candidate, has told a gathering of supporters that he believes ex-United States President Donald Trump did not lose the 2020 poll. During an interview session in Williamsport, Pennsylvania on Wednesday, Vance was asked what kind of message he is sending to independent voters by not answering questions on whether he believes the results of the 2020 election. Trump, Vance's running mate and the Republican nominee for the 2024 race, has long upheld that his loss in 2020 to Democrat Joe Biden was the result of extensive voter fraud, a false claim. Vance has sidestepped the question in the past, but said, according to reports, it is clear to him what happened in the last election. Exhaustive probes have found no evidence of the fraud in the 2020 race. Still, Trump has continued to sow doubt in the election result and has designated that he may be unwilling to accept the outcome of this race too. If everything's honest, I'll gladly accept the results, Trump said in May, adding he expects to win very big. He has also threatened in September to imprison those he perceives as threats to the victory he anticipates for his campaign. Vance has been discreet about contradicting Trump's false election claims. During the October 1st vice presidential debate, moderators asked Vance, will you again seek to challenge this year's election results? His reply was indirect. We are focused on the future, he responded. That was the theme he reprised on Wednesday in Williamsport. There, Vance said he is less worried about 2020 and more concerned about what could happen if Democratic candidate Kamala Harris, the U.S. Vice President, wins in November. Vance says he's focused on listening to voters battling to deal with the rising cost of living. Pennsylvania is considered one of the 7 key battleground states that could determine the outcome of the U.S. election. Still sticking with U.S. 2024 election, court rulings in 3 separate states, Nebraska, Alabama, and Georgia, have overturned or suspended controversial processes that will have limited the ability to vote in the upcoming United States election. The trial of these decisions comes as the November 5th general election approaches in a matter of weeks. An array of local, state, and national offices will be on ballots across the country, including the race for the presidency. The rulings also underscore the myriad battles for voting access in the U.S. In Alabama, one judge took action against an apparent attempt to purge the voter rolls. In Nebraska, another judge upheld the right to vote for those who have finished their felony sentences. And in Georgia, a court declared fresh rules unconstitutional that will have permitted election results to be more easily contested. Some of the efforts hit down on Wednesday are a result of persistent election misinformation. Ex-President Donald Trump, the present Republican candidate for the presidency, has long claimed falsely that the U.S. elections are marred by fraud, sowing doubt in the accuracy of the results. Trump has used his argument to question his defeat to Democrat Joe Biden during the 2020 presidential race. Some Republican officials have responded by seeking restrictive measures they say are required to protect against election malfeasance. However, on Wednesday, voting rights groups hailed the raft of court decisions as victories for Americans' constitutional rights. The Campaign Legal Center said, in a win for Alabama voters, a federal court has blocked Alabama's illegal voter purge program targeting naturalized citizens. The group was among those challenging the voter roll purge in the southern states. Away from U.S. 2024 elections, now China's Coast Guard said it ordered a Japanese fishing vessel to leave the country's territorial waters after it illegally entered an area surrounding a disputed group of islands in the East China Sea. On Thursday, a spokesperson for Beijing's Coast Guard said it took necessary control steps in accordance with the law, cautioned the ship and expelled it during the incursion into waters around the Diaoyu Islands, which Tokyo calls the Senkaku Islands, on October 15th to 16th. Spokesperson Liu Dijun said in a statement, "We urge that the Japanese side to immediately stop all illegal activities in these waters." Japan has yet to comment on this newest incident near the disputed islands. Tokyo rejects China's claim over the tiny, uninhibited islands in the East China Sea, but beneath which there are believed to be potential undersea oil and gas reserves. In recent months, Japan and China have been involved in numerous confrontations in the disputed waters. In April, China's Coast Guard confronted Japanese lawmakers conducting an inspection visit to the area. The lawmakers spent 3 hours near the islands and used drones to observe the surroundings in what China called an act of infringement and provocation. In June, Japan lodged a protest against Beijing after it said Chinese vessels carrying what appeared to be cannons entered what it claims as Japanese territorial waters surrounding the islands. China also maintains extensive maritime claims in the South China Sea, which overlap with several Southeast Asian nations. Confrontations with the Philippine Navy, in specific, have increased over the earlier 18 months, raising fears that a miscalculation could lead to an outbreak of the conflict in the disputed area. The Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague in 2016 ruled that Beijing's claim to 90% of the South China Sea had no basis in international law. Beijing's increasingly assertive stance on Taiwan, resulting in an uptick in military activity in waters surrounding the several islands, which Beijing claims as its own, is also of rising concern in Japan. The U.S. Defense Chief has said the United States military has bombed a series of Houthi targets in Yemen. U.S. Air Force B-2 bombers conducted precision strikes against 5 underground weapon storage locations in Houthi-controlled areas of the country, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said on Wednesday. Austin said the strikes aimed hardened underground facilities used to store weapons components of the kind used by the Houthis to target civilian and military vessels in the region. The statement seemed to be an indirect warning to Iran, the Houthis' main ally, which has hardened nuclear facilities like Natanz or Fordo. Since Iran's October 1st missile attack on Israel in response to the killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut and Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, there has been much speculation about how Tel Aviv will retaliate. Austin also said Houthi attacks continue to interrupt international trade, and he had ordered the strikes to degrade the Houthis' capability to continue their destabilizing behavior and to protect and defend U.S. forces and personnel in one of the world's most critical waterways. U.S. Central Command said in a separate statement that its damage assessment did not show civilian casualties. The Houthis reported airstrikes around Yemen's capital Sana'a, which the group has held since 2014, and around the Houthi stronghold of Sada. It offered no immediate information on damage or casualties. Yemen's Houthis have carried out over 100 missile and drone attacks on ships in the Red Sea since the beginning of the war in Gaza. Last month, they launched a long-range ballistic missile from Yemen that hit central Israel, stoking fire. The missile triggered air raid sirens in Tel Aviv and across central Israel, including the Ben Gurion International Airport, sending residents running for shelter. The Iran-allied group has cast its attacks as a show of support for the Palestinians facing Israeli bombardment, although it has also attacked vessels with no obvious connection to the war. There are no earlier reports of the B-2 Spirit being used in the strikes targeting the Houthis. The nuclear-capable B-2 first saw action in 1999 in the Kosovo War and has been deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya as well. They are rarely used by the U.S. military in combat, as each aircraft is worth some $1 billion. According to report, the B-2s flew to their targets from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. It marked the first time since January 2017 that the wingship stealth bomber has flown a combat mission. Again, on U.S. 2024 poll, United States Vice President Kamala Harris on Wednesday sat down for an interview with the conservative-leaning network Fox News as her campaign tries to attract voters disenchanted with her Republican rival, Donald Trump. But host Brett Breyer wasted no time zeroing in on the focus of their discussion, immigration. From its first moment, the interview was contentious. He confronted her with a Trump campaign advertisement and a video of a bereaved mother testifying to Congress about the death of her child, allegedly at the hands of two undocumented immigrants. However, Harris pointed out that irregular immigration across the U.S.-Mexico border was a concern long before she was elected vice president in 2021, including under Trump, a former president. I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of throwing stones when you are living in a glass house, Harris said in response to the Trump advertisement. You've got to take responsibility for what happened in your administration, she added. Last week, a poll from the Pew Research Center found that voters in the U.S. ranked the economy as their top issue as they head to the polls on November 5th. On more stories now, North Korea destroys road rail links with South Korea. According to a report, North Korea has blown up sections of its road and railway connecting with South Korea and designated its neighbor a hostile state. The Korean People's Army destroyed the 60-meter-long, about 200-feet stretches of road and rail along the east and west sections of the inter-Korean border as part of the phased complete separation of North Korea and South, reports said on Thursday. This is an inevitable and legitimate measure taken in keeping with the requirements of the DPRK Constitution, which clearly defines the ROK as a hostile state, and due to the serious security circumstances running to the unpredictable brink of war owing to the grave political and military provocations of the hostile forces, reports said, using the acronyms of the official names of North Korea and South Korea. Report cited the Ministry of Defense spokesperson as saying Pyongyang will take further steps to permanently fortify the border without providing details. The step to label South Korea a hostile state comes after North Korea's Supreme People's Assembly met last week to rewrite the secretive country's constitution. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, in a speech to his country's rubber-stamp parliament in January, said reunification with South Korea was no longer possible and the constitution should be changed to define its neighbor as a separate hostile country. On Tuesday, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff announced that the North Korean military had blown up northern sections of disused roads dividing the neighbors. Tensions between the Koreas, which remain technically at war after fighting in the 1950 to 53 Korean War, ended without a peace treaty, have been escalating since last year's unraveling of a 2018 military accord aimed at reducing the risk of military clashes along the border. Last week, North Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs threatened retaliation against South Korea after accusing it of operating propaganda leaflet carrying drones over the capital in Pyongyang. The South's Joint Chiefs of Staff said at the time that it could not confirm the North's claim, while urging its neighbor to exercise restraint and not act recklessly. In African shores and on politics, Mozambique ruling party leads presidential polls in all provinces. Presidential candidate Daniel Chapo of Frelimo, Mozambique's ruling party voting in last week's general poll. Preliminary results released on Wednesday show it leading in all 11 provinces, making him likely to be the country's next president. But election observers say they have doubts over the integrity of the poll, saying it did not meet international standards. They've reported issues including disorganized counting, poorly sealed ballot boxes, vote buying, inflated voter rolls, and intimidation in some areas. Meanwhile, opposition parties have cried fraud, and at least one of them has called for a nationwide strike on Monday. Another has said it would challenge the results in court. Frelimo has governed Mozambique since its independence from Portugal in 1975 and has been consistently accused of rigging elections on an allegation it refutes. Final results are expected on the 24th of October. We take a quick break now. When we come back, I'll bring you stories from Nigeria. Please stay with us. You're welcome back, and now stories from Nigeria. We begin with a sad note. 440 Jigawa tanker blast victims buried, 90 hospitalized. Around 90 other victims of the ugly incident are presently in various hospitals in the state receiving treatment. The explosion happened around midnight on Tuesday when the driver of the tanker traveling from Kano to Nguru in Yobe State lost control close to Khadija University, Majia. The tanker, which had departed Kano and was heading to Nguru town in Yobe State, exploded after the driver lost control. According to the police, the disaster was stoked by residents who had rushed to scoop spilled petrol after the tanker overturned. Police Public Relations Officer of Jigawa State Command, DSP Lawan Adam, explained in a statement the residents were scooping fuel from the overturned tanker when the explosion occurred, sparking a massive inferno that killed 94 people on the spot. The incident left another 50 people severely injured, who were then rushed to Ringim and Hadejia General Hospitals for treatment. DSP Adam described the scene as a horrific tragedy, stressing the need for the public to understand the risks associated with scooping fuel from accident scenes. Responding to the tanker explosion accidents in a statement through the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, the federal government directed the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority to probe the tanker explosion that claimed the lives of over 100 people in Jigawa State. In the directive by the Minister of Petroleum Resources, Heineken Lokpobiri, signed by his Special Advisor on Media and Communications, Nneamaka Okafor, on Wednesday, the minister also expressed regret over the circumstances surrounding the unfortunate incident. President Bola Tinubu has called for a comprehensive review of fuel transportation safety protocols across Nigeria following the tanker explosion in Jigawa State, with over 100 lives lost. In a statement on Wednesday, Vice President Kashim Shettima, on behalf of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, sympathized with the families who lost loved ones in the tragic incident and prayed that God grant them the fortitude to bear the loss. The statement, signed by Stanley Nkocha, presidential aide, also announced abrupt federal government intervention for the victims of this great tragedy. Now, fuel price surge reps caution of unrest as federal government labor talks stall. On Wednesday, the House of Representatives warned that the recent spike in fuel pump prices could stoke social unrest. The Green Chamber handed down the warning at a meeting between the federal government and Labour leaders over the surge in petrol prices ended in a stalemate on Wednesday. NNPC retail outlets last week raised petrol prices to 1,030 naira per litre from 897 naira in Abuja per litre, while in Lagos the price jumped to 998 naira per litre from 868 naira per litre. Other regions experienced similar increases. This is the second price addition in a month, reflecting an increase of around 14.8% or 133 naira. The development caused higher transportation and food costs across the country. The organized labor and the organized private sector demanded a quick reversal of the price hike. The Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress condemned the price hike and called for an immediate reversal. But addressing the issue during plenary, the House called on the federal government to quickly reverse the hike in the price of petrol and cooking gas, given the current economic hardship across the country. The resolution of the House praying for the intervention of the executive arm of government followed the adoption of a motion of urgent public importance moved on the floor of the Green Chamber by the minority leader Kingsley Chinda and 100 others. Following the adoption of the motion, the House called on the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited (NNPCL), the Ministry of Petroleum Resources and other relevant agencies to expedite action on the repair/maintenance of domestic refineries to enhance the nation's local refining capacity as a stopgap measure to reduce the dependence on imported refined petroleum products. The House also asked the Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN) to implement monetary policies that will mitigate the adverse effects of fuel price hikes on inflation, particularly with regards to essential goods and services. The House called on the Tinubu-led government to explore alternative energy sources and diversify the country's energy mix to reduce reliance on petrol and gas, promoting renewable energy solutions that were more sustainable and affordable in the long term. It further tasked state governments to adopt policies that will alleviate the financial burden on their citizens, such as tax waivers or levies on transportation and goods affected by high fuel prices. Following the insistence of the Labour leaders on lessening of fuel prices, the federal government team, led by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, George Akume, held a closed-door meeting with the unions in Abuja on Wednesday. Other members at the meeting included the National Security Advisor, Nuhuri Badu, Minister of Finance, Wali Edun, Minister of Budget and National Planning, Abubakar Bagudu, Minister of State for Labour and Employment, Nkiruka Unyo Jocha, and Minister of State for Petroleum, Heineke Lokbobiri, amongst others. And finally, on the news, presidency says no leadership gap as Tinubu Shetima travel abroad. The presidency has guaranteed the public that there was no leadership vacuum amid fears raised regarding the absence of both President Bola Tinubu and Vice President Kashim Shettima from Nigeria. On Wednesday night, in a statement by Bayo Onanuga, the special advisor to the president on information and strategy, he clarified that both leaders remain actively engaged in the country's governance despite their travel commitments. According to him, President Tinubu, who departed on October 3rd for a 2-week walking vacation, has been fully involved in state affairs. Vice President Shettima is also on official duty, having left the country on Wednesday for Sweden, where he is representing Nigeria on a state visit. Onanuga stressed that all government bodies remain fully functional, with senior officials, including the Senate President, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, ministers and service chiefs, maintaining their roles and ensuring smooth operations. Drawing parallels to similar situations, he noted instances during both the present and former administrations where both the President and Vice President were simultaneously abroad, but government functions remain unaffected. The Constitution, Onanuga emphasized, does not mandate the physical presence of the President or Vice President for the continuation of their duties, particularly in this era of virtual engagement. He reassured the public that the country remains in capable hands, even with its top leaders temporarily out of the country. Another look at the top stories. J.D. Vance claims Trump did not lose 2020 election. 3 state court rulings lifts voting restrictions before U.S. polls. China accuses Japan of illegal entry in disputed waters. U.S. B-2 bombers launch precision strikes on Houthis, and Kamala Harris clashes with Brett Breyer on immigration. And that's all on the news. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day.